There's a very specific kind of pressure that doesn't look like pressure at first. A friend calls you, or maybe sends a message late at night. They say they've been working on something for months, maybe years. They finally have traction. They finally have a plan, and now they're opening up a small round. Nothing huge, just enough to get to the next stage. And then they ask if you want in, not because you're some big investor, not because you run a fund, but because they trust you, because you know them, because you believed in them before anyone else did. And that moment feels strange. Part of you feels honored, part of you feels excited, and part of you feels something heavier. Because now it's not just about money, it's about loyalty, belief, identity, history. If you say yes, you're backing your friend. If you say no, what does that mean? And this is where a lot of smart people get pulled into a bad financial decision without realizing it. Not because they're naive, not because they're bad with money, because friendship changes the way money feels. Most people misunderstand this situation. They think the risk is the startup. It's not. The startup is risky, obviously. Most early businesses don't become giant success stories. Some survive, many stall, and a lot just slowly run out of energy, money, or time. But the deeper risk usually isn't just financial loss. It's emotional distortion. When a stranger asks you to invest, your brain becomes analytical. You ask uncomfortable questions. You wonder about revenue, customers, competition, timing, burn rate. You naturally create distance. But when a friend asks you to invest, distance disappears. And that's a problem, because good financial decisions usually need a little emotional distance, not coldness, just enough separation to see clearly. Friendship removes that separation. Now, your judgment gets mixed with memory, with guilt, with admiration, with fear of disappointing someone you care about, and suddenly, you're not evaluating a startup anymore. You're evaluating the relationship through money. That's why people say yes to things they would never say yes to on paper. If the same exact business came from a stranger, they'd hesitate for 5 minutes and walk away. But because it came from someone they've known for 7 years, or grew up with, or worked with during a hard chapter of life, the offer feels different. It feels human. And that's exactly why it gets complicated. Because what usually happens next is not some dramatic movie scene where everyone gets rich or everything explodes overnight. Usually, it's much quieter than that. At first, it feels exciting. You transfer the money, they thank you, there's energy, vision, maybe a pitch deck, maybe a few updates. You feel like you're part of something early. It almost feels meaningful in a deeper way, like you're not just investing in a business, you're investing in a person's future. That feeling is powerful. But feelings like that can hide a very important truth. Early-stage money is often less like a stable investment and more like a high-risk bet wrapped in a personal story. And stories are persuasive, especially when the story includes someone you love, respect, or want to support. Then time passes. A month goes by, then 3, then 6. The updates get shorter, or more optimistic than clear. There's a lot of language about momentum, product development, conversations, pivots, future partnerships. Everything sounds close, but not here. And now you're in a strange position. You don't want to sound distrustful. You don't want to act like some demanding investor over what may not even be a huge amount of money. So you become softer than you normally would. You ask fewer questions. You tell yourself to be patient. You remind yourself that startups take time, and they do. But sometimes patience is wisdom, and sometimes patience is just discomfort wearing a mature face. Because now the relationship is changing. Before, this was your friend. Now this is your friend plus money plus uncertainty. That combination does something to people. It creates silence where there used to be ease. You start wondering whether you're allowed to ask for clarity. They start wondering whether every conversation has hidden financial tension inside it. Normal interactions become slightly less normal. not always visibly, but internally. And the hardest part is that even when nothing bad happens, something often still gets damaged. Not always the friendship in some dramatic, explosive way. Sometimes it's just the lightness of it. Because money creates memory. If the business struggles, you remember the amount. If they buy something unnecessary, you notice it differently. If they post about travel, a new laptop, a nice dinner, a lifestyle upgrade, some part of your brain quietly starts doing accounting. Maybe not out loud, but internally. You think, wait, wasn't the company tight on cash? Even if that thought is unfair, even if their life and the business are more complex than that, even if the money you gave is technically gone and understood to be at risk, emotionally, people don't process it that cleanly. That's what usually happens, not just loss, interpretation. And interpretation is where relationships get expensive, because once money enters a friendship, everything starts carrying extra meaning. Delays mean more, tone means more, success means more, failure means more. Even good news can feel weird. If the company does well, but you own a tiny piece you barely understand, you might still feel confused rather than secure. If they raise more money later and your stake gets diluted or the structure changes, you may realize you never really knew what you were agreeing to in the first place. If they shut it down, you'll probably say, "It's okay, these things happen," while some quieter part of you still feels disappointed or embarrassed or a little used, even if they never intended that. And that's important, because most of the time, your friend is not trying to manipulate you. That's what makes this harder. This isn't usually a villain story. It's usually a human story. They believe in what they're building. They need support. They trust people close to them. They're hopeful. You're hopeful. And hope is beautiful. But hope is not structure. That's the turning point most people miss. When you invest in a friend's startup, you have to decide what world you're in. Are you in the world of friendship? Or are you in the world of investing? Because if you try to blur them together, you usually get the emotional costs of both and the protections of neither. Real investing requires clarity, terms, expectations, risk acceptance, the ability to ask hard questions without shame, the ability to lose money without losing emotional balance, the ability to separate love for the person from the quality of the deal. Most people can't do that cleanly with friends. And honestly, that's normal. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means proximity changes judgment. A lot of people don't actually invest in a friend's startup because the business makes sense. They invest because saying no feels like betrayal. They invest because they want to be the kind of person who supports people. They invest because the amount feels small enough. They invest because they imagine how painful it would feel if the company later succeeded and they weren't part of it. And that last one is powerful. Fear of missing out is one thing when it's a stock chart. It's another thing when it's someone you know personally. Because now the future isn't abstract. You can picture them winning. You can picture yourself watching from the side. And suddenly, your decision isn't about capital allocation anymore. It's about belonging. That's why emotions matter so much here. Money decisions are rarely just math. But with friends, they become even less about math than people want to admit. So what do you do with that? I think the healthiest starting point is brutally simple. If you cannot emotionally and financially afford to lose every dollar, it should not be framed in your mind as a normal investment. That doesn't mean never do it. It means tell the truth about what it is. Maybe it's support, maybe it's belief, maybe it's a high-risk personal bet. Maybe it's closer to a gift with a tiny chance of upside than a stable investment thesis. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you know that's what you're doing. Because clarity is kinder than fantasy. If you ever find yourself in this position, slow the moment down. That alone changes everything. Don't answer inside the emotion of the ask. Let the relationship breathe. Let your own nervous system settle. ask yourself a few uncomfortable things in private. If this business failed completely, would I still feel okay with this person? If a stranger brought me this exact same opportunity, would I take it? Am I trying to make a good financial decision or avoid feeling guilty? And maybe most important, if I want to support them, are there other ways to do that without mixing friendship and capital? Sometimes the cleanest support is not writing a check. Sometimes it's making an introduction, giving feedback, helping with marketing, becoming an early customer, or simply cheering them on without attaching your financial piece to their outcome. And if you do choose to invest, then treat that choice with more seriousness, not less, because the person is your friend. Write things down. Understand what you're getting. Assume the money could go to zero. Don't invest from pressure. Don't invest money you need for rent, debt, emergency savings, or stability. And don't use optimism as a substitute for clarity. That's not being cold. That's being respectful. To them, to yourself, and to the relationship. Because the goal isn't to become cynical about people. The goal is to stop making emotional decisions while pretending they're purely financial. Those are the decisions that usually hurt the most. And if you've already done this before, if you've put money into a friend's idea and it got messy or awkward or disappointing, that doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. You cared. You wanted to believe. You wanted to support someone. There are worse reasons people lose money. But hopefully next time, you'll see the situation a little more clearly. Not every act of support has to become an investment. Not every opportunity deserves your money just because it touches your heart. And not every yes is kindness. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a relationship is keep money honest. Because peace around money usually comes from clean decisions, clear edges, truth before tension. And the more your financial life is built on clarity instead of emotional pressure, the calmer it starts to feel. That's really the deeper lesson here. You don't need to become hard, you just need to become clear. And clarity, more often than people realize, is one of the most generous things you can bring into any relationship. Progress with money rarely comes from one perfect decision. It comes from learning to make slightly calmer ones, over and over again.